It's Bill, and you're tuned into 3 Questions in a Song, the podcast where the title says everything except when it doesn't. I have a bad habit of asking more than 3 questions, which my guest tonight pointed out when he was listening to the show. So this is episode number 59. With me tonight is Mr. Charlie Is it Barath? Is that how you say that?
Yeah.
Barath. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk like Americana and country and roots, and we're going to head in a direction that I don't normally go in, which is good. That's the whole purpose of this podcast, is to get me away from the metal and rock.
It's nice to take something from another plate on the buffet table once in a while.
That's right. So, preparation wise, right before I started to chat with you, I was on another podcast. So you're going to get an even more raw version of the episode than normal, because I really haven't even thought about what I was going to ask you.
Fun. That's good, because I haven't thought about the answers yet.
That makes sense. Off the air, we were talking a little bit about the harmonica. Maybe that's where I'll go. Why don't you give me a little bit of your history with the harmonica? How did that become your instrument of choice?
Started out by the fact that I could afford it. The first time I bought a harmonica in the late 70s, I think I paid $6 for my first Hohner Marine band at the music store at the mall. So it was easy access to an instrument that, that I could put in my pocket. Now, my old man played, and he had a couple squirreled away in his desk drawer. And I used to, pull him out of there once in a while and honk around on it. And he was quite good. And another friend of his who was they were family friends. So I went to school with, some of his kids, but Big Mike was his name. He always had a harmonica with him. And both of them, when they played, man, it was just magical, the sound that came out. It was the traditional style the harmonica was designed to be played in. And so you had all these like great, rhythmic chording going on. It sounded like a calliope on an antique merry-go-round. And I just love the sound of it. But when I bought my first one, and I came home and sat down in my bedroom and noodled around with it, and just as a background, I had no musical training whatsoever, other than the music classes you had to take in grade school. And so I fooled around with it, and found the major scale, and worked out. I think it was "You Are My Sunshine" or some simple little melody. It wasn't pretty, but it was recognizable, and that was it, man. I was off and running, just trying to figure out songs and learn where the notes were, and never thought that I would wind up doing anything with it other than amusing myself.
I was telling you off the air that my grandfather played, and he was the same way. He always had it with him. It was in his pocket of his flannel shirt, and we'd be sitting somewhere and he'd just pull it out and start playing. And
yeah.
Always had a big grin on his face when he was playing too.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it.
So at what point did you decide that you were going to take it a step further and play in a band with it?
Well, I don't know if there was a point that I made the decision. It was kind of, it was a long process, like most things in life. I fooled around with it, and I used to break it out and play, and people, it got to the point where people would invite me. And there was another friend of mine, Randy, who was a great guitar player and singer. As we started getting older, I noticed that we started getting more invitations to parties, mostly because they knew we'd pull the instruments out and start playing. So, but that I was okay with that. It wasn't a bad thing. But as I went on, and then the first couple of times I got to play in front of people, like, somebody invited me to sit in with the band for a song, or go to an open mic, then I really kind of started enjoying that performance aspect of it. I mean, I always liked being in front of people. I was always the kid in grade school who had the lead in the school play and that kind of stuff. And I guess a born ham, if you will. But yeah, I just really wanted to, I decided that I wanted to do that. I didn't really care on what level. I just wanted an opportunity to play for people and continue playing with other musicians, because that was an awful lot of fun as well.
Something that just popped into my head. My first introduction to you was through the SOS PJH concert series.
Yeah.
Which you did an interview with for me then too. But
yeah, that was a great event, by the way.
Watching you play, there were multiple musicians on the stage at any given time, mm-hmm. and it was kind of a mismatch of musicians.
Yes.
But almost every single one of them, when you were up there, would tell you to play a solo. Like you could just see the respect that all of those people had for you. And I thought that was so awesome to see. You didn't think about it. I can see it in your face.
I rarely do. I mean, I don't know. I'm not, I guess you're right. And I pinch myself sometimes, because when I put together a band or, anymore, especially since COVID, I usually wind up I book a gig and then I have to call and see who's available. So it's like having a band is a lot tougher these days. So that's kind of what I do a lot of. And I was just telling someone a while ago, I'm so fortunate and honored to have the caliber of musicians that I play with. When I call them, they're like, "Oh yeah, man, I'll do it." And to me, that is a show of respect that I can't really explain exactly the amount my appreciation, I guess, to them for doing that. And it's the same with this new record that just came out of my new record. It's the people on that record are just unbelievable musicians. And I look at the list of names and I think I gig on a regular basis with the majority of these people. And, and I call them all my friends. And that's pretty amazing to get to that point. And, what it says about me, I don't know. I'll leave that for other people to determine. But I know one thing I sure appreciate, I had to pinch myself sometimes.
I'm actually looking forward to, Jonna from First Angel Media and I have started a collaboration with one of the radio stations that runs my Pennsylvania rock show. And once a month, we're doing a thing. We're calling it Friendly Fire, where we take a handful of songs to their station and we play them without them hearing them. And then they have to try and find a song that they think is similar, but might be a little better. And then the people in the chat box decide which song they liked better, and we harass each other. And I can't wait to take your song to them and see what they come up with, because
the one that I sent you.
Yes. Because I like catching them off guard.
That's to do it.
Yeah. And they actually played a song a couple weeks ago when I was listening that had harmonica in it, and they were talking about how great the harmonica was. And I'm like, oh yeah, just wait.
Nice. Well, if I haven't sent you my my record, when we get done, send me your address and I'll get you one.
Oh, cool. Thank you. All right. So that was one question, right?
Sure.
If you could speak to one musician in the history of music, who would you want to talk to, and what one question would you most want answered?
Oh man. In the history of music.
I know.
Thanks for narrowing it down.
You're welcome. Hey, at least I didn't ask you about the devil this time.
I heard that question get asked to somebody else on one of these three questions in a song, and it's like, yeah, I remember that question. What one person? Good gravy. Man, I don't know. Let me think. Give me a second here. You put me on a spot. Um, I've been influenced by so many people. And I'm kind of known as a blues guy. So, the obvious answer would be, it would be somebody, in the blues realm from yesteryear. I mean, I would love to have been able to hang out with Muddy Waters or even go back further than that for sure. I don't know what I'd ask them, but like I'd even go back further. I mean, I'd have to talk to somebody like I don't know, Woody Guthrie or Hank Williams, and I don't know what I would
That's
really.
the hard part. Figure out what
I don't
you.
know what I would have to ask them, or
Yeah.
certainly I don't know what I would have to add to the conversation. But I think it would be amazing just to hang out with somebody like that and observe kind of the creative process of watching them craft a song or a piece of poetry that became a song. That's one thing that's always kind of intriguing to me, being a songwriter. People ask me about how, what's your formula, what's the process, and it's really different for everybody. And I think every songwriter will tell you they don't have one formula that they use. Some might, but for me, it's like it comes from a lot of different directions. So I would love to sit with somebody like Hank Williams Sr. or Woody Guthrie or even one of the newer one, Willie Nelson or Chris Christopherson, because they've, and Bob Dylan, they've all written like these monster, not only just a monster hit, monster song, which is more accurate and more important in my opinion. A hit, I mean, it's great when you could achieve a certain amount of commercial attention and success. Well, that's good. Obviously, you need that to help, put food on the table. But there are songs that are like very meaningful and impactful to the listener that will never ever get that kind of radio play and sell that many units, and that's okay. So that kind of thing intrigues me. So most likely I would be sitting down with someone of that ilk, and maybe not asking the specific question, but hey, would you mind if I just sit here and watch you throughout the day when you're creating this stuff? Because to me, that's that's where it's at. That's where it's at. And covering stuff is cool, and it's always fun when you can play someone that has a request. But when someone comes up and when they're responding to an original, or when you see somebody in the crowd singing along with a song that you wrote, that's where it's at for me.
You mentioned Willie Nelson, and I'm mad at him. and the reason is probably going to make you laugh. Uncle Jesse from the Dukes of Hazzard does not smoke weed. Did you see that movie?
No.
So they remade the Dukes of Hazzard as a movie.
Yeah,
and,
I
right.
remember. I didn't see. I haven't seen the film. I mean, I grew up the series, so
right. And like he was always on the right side, but they always made it like he wasn't. But in the movie, he's driving down the road smoking marijuana. That's not Uncle Jesse.
I didn't know Willie Nelson made the call on that one.
He was Uncle Jesse in that movie.
Oh, he played Uncle Jesse. Oh,
yeah.
I see the connection.
Yeah, he played Uncle Jesse, and he was smoking marijuana in the movie. And I was like, what is this?
Well, the question was that the director's call, or did Willie just improvise that?
It was Willie playing Willie dressed as Jesse.
Yeah, Uncle Jesse was the patriarch of that whole outlaw family. So
yeah, I'm mad at him.
Yeah, I could see that. But that's Willie. That's
So
probably he'd probably be further down on the list because I don't know if I could stay in the room that long with Willie before passing out.
I was thinking about this the other day. Everyone makes a big deal out of oh, Rolling Stones. Why am I blanking on his name?
Keith Richards.
Yes. Um, about how he's still alive, and what about Willie? I mean,
yes, indeed.
Maybe it's not as hard, but he's been using it for a long time.
Yeah, well, there's a handful of those cats that are have unbelievable longevity, and they lived a fast and furious lifestyle, and most of them are like calmed way down. I don't think Willie probably parties way more than Keith Richards does.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm sure he does.
All right. Anyway, so the song you brought with you tonight, I listened to it a couple times today, and usually I ask the musician to tell me about the song, and I am going to do that. But
okay,
I actually, a lot of times when I listen to music, I'm listening to the music, like how the lyrics and the music go together and how does it sound. But I found myself when I was listening to Ollie Ollie, I actually went back to my childhood when I was running around my neighborhood playing hide and go seek with my friends.
Right.
Like, I was like, this is awesome. And I wanted you to know that I was thankful to hear it because it took me back.
Well, thank you for saying so. That's a common response, and that's why I chose that song to send. It's one. I mean, I'm proud of all the tunes on this new release, but that one is one of the 2 co-writes on the record, and I just love how it came together, and it does, man. It connects with people because I mean, now maybe not somebody who grew up in an urban area, but certainly anybody who lived in anything considering a small town or the suburbs for that matter, they're going to find something in there that they could connect to.
Yeah, and we would play Cowboys and Indians, which probably isn't PC now, but
no,
all of that, just all of that came rushing back as I was listening to it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, my pleasure, man. Thank you, Ben.
So since I think I kind of gave away what it's about. What is there a story that goes along with it? Maybe how you're recording it, or the co-writing process, or something that you could share along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, that was one of the. So this album has 17 songs, 16 originals, and only 2 of those were co-writes. This is one of them. I have a friend of mine that I grew up further down the river in Ohio, right across the river from Wheeling. And I used to go see this guy. I didn't know him at the time. I used to go see his band. He had one of the funnest bar bands called the Castleman's Run Country Grass Band. They played all kind of like bluegrass and country, and they were just so fun. It was a big band, 6, 7, 8 people. And anyway, Gary, the lead guy, when they disbanded, he moved to Pittsburgh actually for a while as a singer-songwriter, then moved to Nashville and has a great career as a professional songwriter in Nashville. Grammy-nominated songwriter and producer, in fact. So he moved to Clarksdale, Mississippi, and opened a recording studio down there, and that's where he and his wife Carol live today. So I've reconnected with Gary probably 3 or 4 years ago, maybe about 4 years, a little over 4 years ago. I was in Memphis for a competition, a blues competition, and he was doing a show. There were a handful the night before the competition started. There was a handful of Clarksdale, Mississippi musicians and songwriters who were doing a showcase, and I saw his name on the bill, and I'm like, I'm going to go see if I could find him. And so we went to find him, and I introduced myself, and we start talking about the old times. And so he's doing the showcase. My wife and I are sitting there watching and eating dinner on Beale Street in this little restaurant. and he's in the middle of a song. You know, usually when somebody wants me to sit in, they'll give me a heads up. He's in the middle of the song, and he looks up and he looks at me. He goes, "Hey, this song could probably use some harmonica." So I grabbed the correct harp and I walked down, and he leaned away from the mic, and I played a solo, and like we've been kind of tight friends ever since. So anytime we go nearer the South, we usually swing through Clarksdale. I have some other friends there as well, and we stay with Gary and Carol. And we were hanging out there a few years ago, and he says, "Hey, while you're here," he says, "let's write a song together." You know, which wasn't intimidating at all, because, like I said, this guy spent many, many years in Nashville as a professional songwriter with a lot of success. So I drug out my computer and was looking at through some of my notes and partial songs that songwriters will collect, and I had this a long list of phrases about growing up in the small town where I grew up in Belmont County, Ohio. And I really wasn't sure where I was going to go with it, but I had all these phrases, you know, and he saw that and he's like, "Let's do something with that." So we started putting our heads together, and we picked out, you know, some of the phrases that worked in the structure of the song, and collaborated and came up with a chorus, and, you know, and recorded the demo there before I left. And then I brought it back here, and I started doing it with my little hillbilly trio called the Millbillies. And it became a real popular song because everybody, like yourself, instantly connects with it. And so, you know, I knew it was going to be on this new record of mine. And it's, you know, I can't pick a favorite, but it ranks right up there. It's a fun tune.
Cool. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and play Ollie Ollie by Charlie Barath, and we will be right back. I'm not actually going to play that right now, Charlie, because Facebook would mute us, and we don't want that to happen. But I'm also sitting here contemplating. I have this thing that was sent to me that I'm supposed to put out starting on the 15th. Today's the 14th. I'm trying to decide if I should do it or hold off. I'm probably going to hold off. I'll tell you about it off the air, though, since I mentioned it.
Okay.
And then anyone who wants to know what it is, starting tomorrow, start watching all my social media and listen to this week's Pennsylvania Rock Show, and you'll hear about it. It's really cool, but I don't want to put it out early.
Keep them wanting more.
That's right. All right, here we go. That was Ollie Ollie by Charlie Barath, who is with me tonight on 3 Questions and a Song, episode number 59. I don't know how many questions I've asked so far, more than 3, but we're going to keep trucking along. So, Charlie, the official 3rd question comes from last episode's guest, who was Davy Williamson, and I took notes on it, and I'll hold it up so you.
Okay.
So he noticed when he went to check you out that you were friends with Tony Holiday from Salt Lake City, who is also a very well-known harmonica player.
Yeah, I think he's down in Memphis now.
All right. Well, he wanted to know that if you're close with him at all, and if you've ever played a show with him.
I haven't done a show with him. Our paths have crossed on several occasions. You know, I don't know him as well as some of the other cats out there, but yeah, our path. We've been, you know, we haven't shared a stage together, but we hung out before. Tony's a great guy, an amazing player, super strong family man. He's got a beautiful family, and a hardworking man. He's a hardworking dude.
So here's the second part to it. He said that if you haven't performed with him, he would like to help you get in touch with him and make that happen.
No, I'm open, man. I'm open. So, yeah, I'd love to do something. Tony does a lot of collaborative stuff. He had a really good success with these I forget what they call them, front porch concerts or back porch. It was like blues on the porch. I can't remember what he called it, but he put together. He would go to different cities and get these groups of amazing musicians, blues musicians, to record on like front porch or wherever, just kind of on the street. He's done things on the street in Memphis in front of Sun Studios, and then he wound up making an album. out of these performances, and I think it did very well. And it's very nicely done, considering it was all done, like in different remote locations and not in a studio. But man, they came out great. In fact, my wife and I were going down to Louisiana to visit a friend, and on the way down, we stopped to visit another harmonica player friend of mine, J.D. Taylor, who lives in Jackson, Tennessee. And they were getting ready that day to do one of these front porch sessions on, it was who was it? It was it was like a shack where there was and I'm blanking on the name of the blues musician who lived there, but they moved his shack near this heritage museum, and they were doing it on the front porch. Sleepy John Estes, maybe. They were doing it on the front porch of his actual place where he lived, this little 1 or 2 room place. And so we were, I wasn't involved in it, but my wife and I were there hanging out while they went through the process of recording these songs. It was fun to watch.
So you telling me that story reminded me, you kind of do a weekly thing too with lives.
I do. Yeah, so 15 months now it's been since the shutdown, plus or minus. I knew 2 things when that happened, when all the gigs went away. My last one was March 15th, 2020. And I knew 2 things. I knew, one, I needed to stay engaged with my audience somehow. And the obvious medium was the live streaming on social media. The other thing I knew was that everybody and his brother was going to do that. And if I wanted to stick out and stand out at all, I had to come up with, something. So, I waited a week, and I, sure enough, almost everybody was doing Friday and Saturday, maybe Sunday, sitting in their rumpus room with their acoustic guitar playing their music. So I figured, well, I'll do a Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern. And as I mentioned off air, I have really crappy internet service here at my house because I live in a kind of a remote area, which means I have no neighbors and I'm surrounded by woods, and it's very peaceful most of the time. So I will give up cell service and good internet for that any day. So the first day I was getting ready to go live, the power went out. So I jumped in my car and I drove up to this giant empty parking lot at the mall, a couple miles up the road, and I did it from my car. The next day, I had a scheduled Instagram live session with Hohner Music. I'm a Hohner endorser. I'm a part of their artist roster, and same thing. It was like sketchy on the power and the internet. So back up to the mall and sat there and did it in my car. The following Wednesday, I was just getting ready to go live and the internet went out. So back up the road. And I thought, well, maybe this is the shtick that makes me just a little bit different from everyone else. And so I rebranded it as Cartoons. See how clever I can be? I've rebranded as Cartoons, and I made it a weekly thing. For a while, I was even working with local restaurants and businesses as a sponsor. I would do it in front of their place or their parking lot and give them a plug, and they in turn would hook me up with free product, whether it was a brisket sandwich or a gift certificate or whatever. I did that for a few months, and then I got away from it and just went to doing all music and conversation. And it'll be at the end of this month, it'll be 15 months I've been doing that. I've only missed like 5 shows because of other engagements.
One of them was my fault.
Yeah, not only was I able to stay engaged, but I was actually able to build my audience. I had people tune in from the UK, Spain, France, Brazil, There's a young guy over in New Zealand who watches on his lunch break because it's, you know, the opposite. They're like 16 hours ahead of us. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a huge benefit for me because it's kept my instrument in my hand. It's forced me to learn new material. It was just an opportunity for me to, you know, keep working on, you know, my people skills and performing. Yes, it's weird sitting in your car playing music to your phone. Thankfully, I could see the people's comments, so that helps with the engagement. But yeah, coming up on 15 months.
Um, so that's kind of how the video portion of my interviews happened. I realized that, you know, I was doing just audio and now I had more time on my hands, and so did everybody else. I'm like, well, what can I do to up this? And
yeah,
there was a webcam sitting there one day, and I was like, I'm going to do that.
yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, you know, the visual stuff is definitely more, you know, it gets people's attention more than, you know, than just an audio or just a still picture or whatever. It's definitely a good move on your part.
So what I need from you now is a question for Dynasty Zero, which is next episode's guest. And I'm gonna kind of let you off the hook because I'm gonna tell everybody that I dropped the ball and forgot to tell you ahead of time. So we're working on me describing to him.
Well, as I mentioned, you know, from the sound of it, they're a group of much younger folks than I. And, you know, I like people. I don't understand, you know, the young people sometimes. You know, that's me getting old. It's not their fault. So most likely, the question that I would ask wouldn't be impacted by whether or not I studied up on their stuff or not. But I would ask simply now. I come from a way different era. Those folks are probably all young enough to be, you know, definitely young enough to be my kids, probably younger than my kids. But I know where my musical influence came from growing up in the 60s and in the 70s, and the kind of, you know, I was a rock and roller back then. I love that old the heavier the better. It's way different now, what they call hard rock, than what I called hard rock, you know. But the question I would ask is,
let me stop you there for a second. When I listened to the Beatles, I'm like, this was controversial.
right? Oh, you know, well, you could go back. And I was just talking to someone the other day about this, about you know, the racial segregation in music. You know, not only did, you know, what they call race records, black music, you didn't hear it in mainstream markets. It was relegated to, you know, areas that had a high population of African Americans, and, you know, and their radio stations only went out so far. So, but when some of these early white rock and rollers, and by early I'm talking like Buddy Holly and people like that, you know, when they were first playing that stuff on white radio, there was an uproar because people were like, we don't want to hear this noise. What is that? It's like, you know, and it wasn't even, you know, what they would consider black music is heavily influenced by the great early blues and the rockers of those days that, you know, that inspired guys like Elvis and Buddy Holly and all those early cats. But they were really cutting edge as far as, you know, the white market was concerned. So it's different, you know, when you start thinking about what things were like in a different era. You can't really judge it by today's standards, and, you know, nor can you judge today's stuff by, like, if you were to come from the past, from the 50s or 60s, and come into the 21st century, you know, you can't make a judgment on that because, you know, you're not from that world. Oh, so different. So different. So yeah, the Beatles were very controversial, as were a bunch of other ones, and it seems silly now, but then that was the world. But yeah, so hard, you know, heavy rock, heavy metal, whatever you want to call it, you know, to me, you know, hard rock was, you know, the Zeppelin and, you know, and I got into some like a Black Sabbath and some stuff that was even, heavier. I love that stuff. That's, I know there are younger folks who still kind of go back and listen to that, but by today's standards, it's a whole different genre almost. But so my question to your next guest would be about influence. And, if I were sitting in the room with them and asked them, who are your influences to kind of direct you into the type of music you're creating now, they would probably cite bands and players that I'd never heard of, because it was, like after my time, I guess would be a way to put it. But that's what I would be curious about. Why, why do you gravitate towards this music? What puts you on that path? And how far back does that influence go? And the part B to that question is, if, what's the oldest or earliest, quote unquote, heavy metal or hard rock that, you've discovered and consider an influence? Because that's, the whole evolution of not just rock and roll. The music evolves. It has since, I can imagine the very first time a caveman dropped a rock and it hit another rock, and he went, "Ooh, makes a good sound," and he starts banging it. And then another caveman came along and he picked up a log and hit a rock, and it made a different sound. And the next thing you know, they're doing different things, and and music evolves like that. Like every music that you hear now, it's inspired by something that came along before it. You mentioned country music being after the mid 80s, it became more like pop music. Well, yeah, but like like you go back to the older country music, like the very early stuff, that Nashville sound, when it became a thing, it was like night and day compared to, the Carter family and Jimmy Rogers and Hank Williams and all those guys. And then when the Nashville sound came a thing, it was, it had its own kind of formula and feel and sound. And, we talked about Willie Nelson. Willie Nelson, he didn't fit in with that crowd. That's why he went back to Texas and became the Willie Nelson that we know and love today. Because it wasn't.
I'm still mad at him.
Yeah. Aside from his Uncle Jesse portrayal, but musically, I was like, yeah. I mean, it's like I heard the story of him. He was so frustrated, he went out and laid down in the middle of the street in downtown Nashville because he was just hoping somebody would run him over, because he wasn't, and he didn't look like he does now. He had short hair and clean shaven. He looked the part and the nice suit, but his music and his sound didn't fit the Nashville sound. So, and it's just part of the evolution of it.
You said the earliest musician, the earliest thing that I can remember hearing is Johnny Horton. The War of 1812, I think is the name of the song.
Yeah.
And I knew you would know it. Usually when I bring it I have to sing, and I'm a terrible singer. But people are like, "What?"
I know the song very well.
So I won't sing it. But yeah, that was something that my dad used to have that album on cassette, and he would play it in the car.
Yeah.
So that was my introduction to music. And then what brought me into rock was I have uncles, one who's 5 years older than me and one who's 9 years older than me. So I spent some time with them when I was younger, and they would listen to, Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses and Kiss, and, and I was looking up to them. And
right. Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean,
it wasn't my parents' music. So
no. Oh, well, my parents, they were from, that greatest generation. They lived through the Depression and World War II and all that stuff. So, they were listening to the big band and, Dorsey Brothers and all that stuff. But more often than not, my old man was listening to WWVA, which what my mother told me was when they were younger, he didn't like that hillbilly music. He didn't want anything to do with it. He liked the big band stuff, the stuff that they went out and to dance to live bands when they were recording. But yeah, I grew up. It's like all we heard on in the car. Of course, we only had AM radio. It was WWVA out of Wheeling, which was all that old classic country. I hated it at the time. I didn't want to hear that, and I wanted to hear something, popular, something the younger people like. And then my older brother had a good collection of records, and and I got to listen to. I got turned on to a lot of stuff just by being in the room while he was listening to whatever it was, the Doobie Brothers or Blood, Sweat and Tears or Iron Butterfly and Cat Stevens.
Anagata Devita.
Oh yeah, and as I wore that record out, and it was like, and then some of the heavier stuff that he had, the Zeppelin and the Black Sabbath and and that's like, that's really what I got into, and it was like again, mid '80s, and music was going in a weird direction. In my opinion, it was getting away from what I really fell in love with as far as rock and roll. So I started, digging back to see what influenced some of those cats, and got into blues and roots and Americana and, and folk and, and now like the old country, I love that stuff.
Where can the listeners track you down? How can they get a hold of your album, and where can they keep track of where you're going to be at?
Well, right now, my website, Charlie Barath Harmonica, is under construction, and it should be up within, hopefully by the end of the month, maybe. So I've been pushing everyone towards just to see what I'm up to. My Facebook music or artist page, also Charlie Barath Harmonica. You can follow that. That's where I do the cartoons live stream from. And toward the top of that page, I pinned a Google Calendar so they could click on that and see where I'm playing. So, and I'm just getting back into populating my calendar. I had to like retrain myself how to do that because there have been so few gigs up until recently. But I also have a little hillbilly trio called the Millbillies. Also have a page, but I put those gigs on my calendar as well. That's a great place to do it. If you want to hear the new record, it's available for purchase. You send me an email at charliebarath@gmail.com and pay Venmo or PayPal, and I'll drop one in the mail for you if you're old like me and like a tangible item in your hand. If you don't and you'd rather have a download, charliebarath.bandcamp.com. You can listen to the new album along with some other older content and download as much or as little as you want on Bandcamp. The new record will be on my Spotify page as well as all the other streaming networks, but probably not until later this summer, maybe mid-July, I'm guessing at the earliest, by the time I get it put up there. And the reason I'm doing that is like I want to sell some stuff before people listen to it for free. Not that I'm being miserly, but I got to pay for this record at some point.
I recently learned that Bandcamp will only let you listen to a track so many times before they tell you have to buy it.
Well, I mean, that's not a bad thing. And the other thing that's nice about Bandcamp, Bill, that and a lot of the general public doesn't realize this. So I don't have any. I'm not shy about talking about it. The streaming platforms typically don't give the artist a whole lot. We've all heard those stories. It's 1/6 of a cent per stream or some ridiculous amount. And then when you buy, say, you're a member of Spotify, and that your $9.99 a month or whatever it is allows you to listen and download as much as you want for no extra charge. You know what the artist gets from that? So Bandcamp, on the other hand, they take like 20%. They take a 15% fee and another 5% for the handling and transaction. And the rest goes to the artist, which I think is pretty generous. And it's actually a pretty good margin. If you ask anybody in retail, they'd love an 80% margin.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because XRP, who I mentioned earlier, part of their format, you can upload your music to their website, and it then becomes, it gets dumped into a database that all their DJs can play from. But it also goes into a store that they have. And the only money that they keep when the money is purchased is to cover the transaction. Everything else goes to the artists. So any musicians that are out there listening, two things. First, if you're from the Build the Scene area where I operate, don't send them their music until I've played it on Friendly Fire, but then send it to them. Because they have a good percentage to come back to you. I just don't want them using I'm going to call it my music, but the music from my area against me in my own show.
Right. What's it called? XRP?
XRP. It's xrpradio.co.uk.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I'll send you the link.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm interested, and I'll wait. I won't.
Well, most likely, I'm going to have to probably fight John on this because she wants to go more metal next episode, but I'm going to try and push you into the next episode. Maybe that's what we'll do. We'll play all metal and then we'll play Charlie at the end.
Well, there's some, I wouldn't say it's metal or, but there is some full blues stuff content on my record, which you could listen, feel free to listen on Bandcamp, and I'll like I said, I'll still send you a hard copy. I'm assuming you have a CD player. Not everybody does.
I have a 2003 Camry. I have a 6 CD changer.
Oh, sweet. Sweet. I'm waiting for the uproar to get loud enough to where car manufacturers start putting CD players back in their cars.
They may have to put record players back into the cars because people are buying vinyl.
Yeah, that's good. That's not a bad thing. I mean, people don't listen to music like we did. I mean, we would literally, a group of us would congregate at each other's house or apartment on a Friday night, and we'd each bring a few records, like the big LPs, and a 6-pack of beer, a bottle of wine, maybe something in a little baggie, who knows. We'd sit around and we'd take turns listening to sides, and it could be it ran the gamut from, it could be heavy, it could be rock, it could be blues, it could be country, it didn't matter. And we'd sit around and we'd listen to music. What a concept. Like, people don't do that now. Music is almost always like it's on in the background, while you're doing some. It's so accessible, which is good, but it's just always like this din in the background, and which is what. Thank you again for listening to the song I sent you, like an actual listen. So you weren't listening like, hey, this is just kind of a good feel to it. You're listening to the actual song, and you let it take you somewhere, and that's, to me, the beauty and the magic of any art, but music primarily, because I'm a musician.
So what we're gonna end the show, but I do want to tell you something afterwards, so don't go anywhere. So this has been episode number 59 of 3 Questions and a Song, featuring Charlie Barath. You can find him on Facebook at Charlie Barath Music.
Charlie Barath Harmonica. And his website
will also be charliebarathharmonica.com. It should be up by the end of the month-ish.
I'm hoping.
July.
Yeah, there's a landing page there, but I'm working with a guy in Chicago who's helping me put it together. So,
all right. So make sure that you check out the next episode of 3 Questions and a Song, where you'll get to hear Dynasty Zero answer Charlie's question, and also check out the other shows. Friendly Fire on this July. It's going to be the 3rd Saturday, but usually it's the 2nd Saturday of the month, and Pennsylvania Rock Show, which is every Friday. My name is Bill, and we will catch you next time.